that we may show your hope to the world.
Recently at church I gave a message on the prophecy of Immanuel, which is a famous prophecy that ties in with Christmas and the birth of Jesus Christ. I'll read to you the prophecy from Isaiah chapter 7 verse 10, the sign of Immanuel. Again the Lord spoke to Ahaz, ask a sign of the Lord your God. Let it be as deep as Sheol or high as heaven. But Ahaz said, I will not ask, and I will not put the Lord to the test. And he said, Hear then, O house of David, is it too little for you to weary men, that you weary my God also? Therefore the Lord himself will give you a sign. Behold, the virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and shall call his name Immanuel. So that is the prophecy given by Isaiah. This is over 700 years before the time of Christ. And he says there will be a sign, and a virgin will conceive and give birth to a son, and shall call his name Immanuel. And as I was studying this, one of the resources that I came upon that I found to be very helpful was in the ESV Study Bible. And I thought it would be good to read the notes to you from Isaiah 7:14 and what the ESV Study Bible says about that, because it's very extensive and I think just really shows you the treasure trove of information that you find in this Bible. So here are the ESV Study Bible notes on Isaiah 7:14. Isaiah 7:14, the Lord himself, failure of the human king to respond to the invitation, verse 12, results in the divine king again taking the initiative. Similarly, two such signs would be offered to Hezekiah, Ahaz's son and successor. Although some claim that the word translated virgin, Hebrew Alma, refers generally to a young woman, it actually refers specifically to a maiden, that is, to a young woman who is unmarried and sexually chaste, and thus has virginity as one of her characteristics. Thus, when the Septuagint translators, 200 years before the birth of Christ, rendered Alma here with Greek Parthenos, a specific term for virgin, they rightly perceived the meaning of the Hebrew term, and when Matthew applied this prophecy to the virgin birth of Christ, see Matthew 1:23, it was in accord with this well-established understanding of Parthenos, virgin, as used in the Septuagint and in other Greek writers. So in the New Testament, Matthew picks up on this prophecy and talks about how the Messiah would be born of a virgin. And the Greek translation of the New Testament that was used during the time of Christ, although they also used Hebrew, but the Greek translation uses the specific term for virgin in regard to this prophecy. Isaiah prophesies further that it is the virgin who shall call his name Immanuel. Bestowing a child's name often falls to the mother in the Old Testament. For example, the naming of the patriarchs in Genesis 29:31 through 30:24. Although other women, or even the father, could be involved in the naming. The name itself, Immanuel, God is with us, is the message of the sign. Such is its importance that Matthew translates it for his readers, Matthew 1:23. Immanuel is used as a form of address in Isaiah 8:8, your land, O Immanuel, and as a sentence in 8:10, for God is with us. To say that God is with someone or a people means that God is guiding and helping them to fulfill their calling. As such, it would provide a pointed message either to the fearful Ahaz or to the failing royal house. So directly this prophecy is given to Ahaz and the royal household during Isaiah's time, 700 years BC. Christian interpretation follows Matthew in applying this verse to the birth of Jesus. However, some aspects of Isaiah's prophecy also relate to the significance of the sign for Isaiah's own day. This being the case, a number of questions are raised. To whose family does the virgin belong? And how should her marital status be understood? What is the precise significance of the child's name? Is it a personal name, or should it be understood as a title? Most importantly, does the fulfillment of this sign belong to Isaiah's own day, or does it rather point, even in his day, to a much more distant and complete fulfillment? Christians have typically answered these questions in one of two ways. So prophecy can be really challenging because we don't always know exactly all that was intended in the original prophecy. And what this is talking about is that the fulfillment of this prophecy could have taken place on some level in Isaiah's own day, but it also raises the question, how does that relate to its fulfillment in Jesus? Some hold that the sign has a single fulfillment. That is, the sign points originally and solely to the birth of Jesus as the ultimate Messiah. Those who hold this view emphasize the understanding of Alma only as virgin, thus precluding any near-term fulfillment before the birth of Jesus. This view understands Immanuel as a title, as in 8:8, rather than a personal name. It is also noted that the variation in reference to a son in 7:14 as compared to a boy in verse 16 further distinguishes between the child of miraculous birth and a more generic reference to a male child unrelated to the divine promise. This has the effect of separating the reference to Isaiah's day from the fulfillment of the announced miraculous son to be born at a future time. According to this interpretation, then, the prediction of the virgin birth in verse 14 is a straightforward prediction of an event cast well into the future, and Matthew's application of this prophecy to Jesus provides the divinely inspired testimony to there being a single fulfillment of Isaiah's prophecy. By this interpretation, the sign is directed to the house of David to affirm God's intention of preserving David's dynasty in keeping with the promises of 2 Samuel 7:12-16, in order to bring Israel's mission to its glorious fulfillment. God will use any means to do this, even miraculous ones. This is a rebuke to the faithless and secular outlook of Ahaz. So that is the single fulfillment interpretation of this prophecy, where it's saying that Isaiah is giving a prophecy to the household of Ahaz, the kingly dynasty that ultimately was going to be judged, but then a new king is promised, and that king is the Messiah Jesus, who fulfills this prophecy in a miraculous way. Those who see in this sign a more immediate application to Ahaz and his times usually argue that the prophecy has a double fulfillment. That is, both an immediate fulfillment in Isaiah's day and a long-term fulfillment in the birth of the Messiah. Those who hold this view argue that it is natural for the name Immanuel to be understood in terms of double fulfillment, since two other sons perform similar symbolic roles in the context. They argue further that the prophet's own interpretation of the sign in 7:16 and 17 applies it directly to Ahaz's own day. It should be observed that this understanding of the text in no way diminishes Matthew's affirmation of the supernatural conception and virgin birth of Jesus. Even if the prophecy does include an immediate application to the time of Ahaz, however, the prophecy cannot have been fulfilled completely by the birth of someone like Maher-shalal-hash-baz or by Hezekiah, as some have suggested, since 9:6 prophesies the birth of a son whose name will be Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace, a statement that could only apply to the Davidic Messiah. On this understanding, then, the prophecy of 7:14 foretells the birth of Immanuel, which was fulfilled partially in Isaiah's time, but fully and finally in the person of Jesus Christ. So there are some who see the Immanuel prophecy as being fulfilled on some level during the time of Isaiah, but then fully being fulfilled, ultimately being fulfilled in the time of Christ, because this son is called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, and this points to the Messiah, Jesus Christ. Faithful interpreters can be found on either side of this debate. One should not, therefore, lose sight of those truths on which all agree. The prophet speaks authoritatively for God. Ahaz and his house stand under judgment. The prophetic sign directly meets the failures of Ahaz's day. Fulfillment of the prophecy comes about through direct divine intervention in human history, and the sign finds its final fulfillment in the virgin birth of Jesus the Messiah, who is literally God with us. As you can see, the ESV Study Bible really is a wonderful source of information and insight into biblical passages. I have talked about the ESV Study Bible before. You can watch that video if you want to learn more about it. I encourage you to get a copy of this study Bible because it really is good. And I find just what you see here, that the ESV Study Bible takes certain passages that may be hard to understand or certain theological concepts, and it gives you various views that theologians have, that Bible interpreters have, so that you can see different angles and you can see all the information for yourself. I think they do a wonderful job of describing various views on different theological themes and passages. You can see that also, I think, as I show in my video on how they deal with eschatology. There are varying views of the end times, and they lay those out and summarize them in their notes. So it is a wonderful, wonderful source of information. I encourage you to check out the ESV Study Bible. But this isn't just a plug for that Bible. I really did want to focus on the prophecy of Immanuel, give you some information about it so you could think about it, but ultimately to remind us what this time of year represents, that the prophecy of Isaiah has been fulfilled. Unto us a child has been born, unto us a son has been given. His name is Jesus, and he is Immanuel, God with us.